Hello everybody, I'm Teo Samarja, a former flat earther, and I'm going to explain why I am no longer a flat earther. Many people on YouTube have tried to refute the flat earth theory, but they are not familiar with it and thus are unlikely to convince actual flat earthers. This video won't be like that. I am intimately familiar with the beliefs held by modern day flat earthers. Let's start with Aristotle's three arguments for the Earth being round, because I think those are actually good arguments if you address the objections typically made by the flat earthers. Probably in any discussion about the shape of the Earth, the first argument for the Earth being round is ships disappearing bottom first. Ships appear to sink as they proceed over the horizon. Flat earthers, as far as I can tell, offer three different responses to that argument. The most common response is that ships disappearing bottom first is an illusion created by waves. The other two responses are some word salad about optics, which is present on the Flat Earth Wiki, or the claim that the light is affected by gravity, so it shouldn't be surprising that there is a time when the light from the top of the ship reaches your eye, while the light from the bottom of the ship doesn't. Now, for the claim that ships disappearing bottom first is caused by waves, assume you know basic trigonometry, try to calculate how high those waves would have to be to hide a ship that's 5 kilometers away from you. Namely, at the sea level, the horizon is 5 kilometers away. I will give you a hint. The waves would need to be slightly higher than your eye level. There are almost never such high waves. Not to mention ships appear to sink as they go over the horizon, even when there are no waves at all. As for that word salad about optics, which is presented on the Flat Earth Wiki, I don't understand it, and I don't think anybody does. Try to derive from that explanation the formula for how far ships are when they start disappearing bottom first, depending on what the elevation of the observer is. Can you? I don't think you can. As for the claim that ships disappearing bottom first is caused by light being affected by gravity, hey listen, flat earthers probably need to claim that gravity doesn't exist, because if gravity existed, it would crash the disk of the Earth into a sphere. So you need to invent a reason as to why that doesn't happen. I seriously doubt that you can make a coherent mathematical model of gravity on a flat Earth that would make any prediction about ships disappearing bottom first, much less make predictions that are quantitatively consistent with reality. Flat Earthers also often point to anecdotal reports of bottoms of the ships reappearing when one looks through a telescope. And that is indeed difficult to explain if you assume the Earth is round. However, in order for that to be considered evidence for the Earth being flat, one needs to have a mathematical model of the flat Earth which predicts that. Flat Earthers don't have such a mathematical model. The second Aristotle's argument for the Earth being round is that different constellations are visible from different places on Earth. The standard response to that argument made by flat earthers is to claim that the stars being 3,000 miles up in the sky would provide the same effect. But that is false. If the stars were 3,000 miles up in the sky, constellations would have different shapes, depending on which place on Earth you look at them from. There would be perspective distortions, and unless you assume all the stars are at the exact same height, there would be parallaxes. That's not what we observe. From different places on Earth, different constellations are visible, but the common ones have the same shape. Some flat earthers object to that by saying that heliocentrism suffers from the same problem, namely, why don't constellations have different shapes in different parts of the year as the Earth goes around the Sun? But that's not really an analogous problem. For heliocentrism, you can claim that stars are very far away. For Flat-Earthism, you need to invent a different reason why constellations shift. And even if that argument were sound, shouldn't you then be a geocentricist rather than a flat earther? The third Aristotle's argument for the Earth being round is that the Earth's shadow on the Moon during the lunar eclipse is always round. If the Earth were a circular disk, we would expect the Earth's shadow on the Moon to sometimes be circular and sometimes be elliptical, but that's not what we observe. Flat earthers usually respond by claiming that it is not the Earth's shadow on the Moon, but a shadow of some other celestial body. And they are right that this argument is relatively weak. But not all arguments for the Earth being round are that weak. In my opinion, the first two Aristotle's arguments are enough to convince any reasonable person that the Earth is round. However, in case that's not enough, here are 5 additional arguments for the Earth being round that Aristotle couldn't have known because he lived in ancient times rather than in a modern age. So here are 5 modern arguments for the Earth being round. And once again, I am intimately familiar with the flat Earth theory, so those are not strawman arguments. First, the dip of the horizon. On multiple places on the Flat Earth Wiki, such as on this page about the basic perspective, it is being stated that the horizon is always at the observer's eye level. But that is demonstrably not the case. You can observe that in 2 ways. You can see the sunset twice if you watched the sunset sitting down and then quickly stand up. The sun stays at your eye level, but the horizon imperceptibly falls. And you can measure the dip of the horizon directly from an airplane using a device with a camera and a gyroscope, like almost all modern mobile phones. The formula for the dip of the horizon is easily derived from the round Earth theory, as anybody who knows high school mathematics can confirm. And here we see how the round Earth theory superior to the flat Earth theory. It makes such simple and testable predictions. It seems to me that you can never derive an exact formula for anything from the flat Earth theory. And let me be clear that I am not one of those people who claim you can see with the naked eye from an airplane that the Earth is round. No, I am claiming you can see the dip of the horizon using proper tools. Second modern argument. The gravitational acceleration, this 9.8 meters per second squared, measurably decreases when you climb to a high mountain. Flat earthers are claiming that the gravity is created by the disk of the Earth moving upward at 9.8 meters per second squared, and that would provide the same effect as what people traditionally think is gravity. But that's not the case. If gravity were caused by the disk of the Earth moving upward at 9.8 meters per second squared, then the gravitational acceleration would be exactly the same everywhere on the Earth. It isn't. I've heard some flat earthers claim that the changes in gravitational acceleration are caused by stars having a small gravitational field. But there are 2 problems with that hypothesis. First of all, once again, if gravity exists, why doesn't it crush the disk of the Earth into a sphere? Second, as we climb up on a mountain, the gravitational acceleration decreases. If the change in gravitational acceleration were caused by stars, it would increase rather than decrease. Of course, you can invent the stars have negative masses and so on, but that's an obvious ad hoc hypothesis. Third, my favorite argument, as I have a bachelor degree in computer engineering, try to explain to me in detail how the GPS devices work. Which algorithm do they follow? Flat earthers generally claim GPS devices receive signals from some secret land-based emitters. But if so, how come a GPS device is capable of telling your location including your elevation, with just 3 signals. The simple truth is, when you know your distance from 3 points, you can calculate 2 points where you might be. Those points will be different, mostly in elevation. If GPS devices receive signals from satellites, they can eliminate the point that's above the satellites as impossible. However, if they receive signals from land-based emitters, they cannot do that. How can they possibly know if they are below or above those land-based emitters that they receive signals from? Not to mention, if GPS devices received signals from some secret land-based emitters, we would expect them not to work in the middle of an ocean, but they do work there. I am not saying land-based GPS on a flat Earth would be impossible. I am saying you can prove using those 2 observations that the GPS devices we have are not land-based. For polar day and polar light on Antarctica. If time zones work the way flat earthers claim they do, they would be impossible. Fifth modern argument. A bit of a soft question. Can you point me to any scientific discovery that was made using anything resembling your methods, by making countless ad hoc hypotheses and asserting massive conspiracies? Yes, science has been wrong before, but scientists were almost always simply mistaken, not lying, especially not massively colluding with each other. If you want to help the science, find some low-hanging fruit in science and publish some papers in peer-reviewed journals about it. There is still low-hanging fruit in science, like in applying information theory to the names of places. I published a paper in 2 journals, called Etymologia Karašica, about the idea that this KR that repeats in the Croatian river names, 2 rivers named Karašica, Krka, Korana, Krapina, Krbavica, and Kravarčica, was the Illyrian word for to flow. Mainstream linguistics claims that this KR pattern in the Croatian river names is a coincidence, but nobody before me, as far as I know, has attempted to calculate how much of a coincidence it would have to be. I believe I have calculated using the collision entropy and the birthday paradox that the probability of that KR pattern occurring by chance is somewhere between 1 in 300 and 1 in 17, so that it is probably statistically significant. Do something like that. Don't do countless ad hoc hypotheses and don't assert massive conspiracies. And understand that the collection of things science supposedly cannot explain is not a valid argument, unless you have a model which actually explains those things. Also understand that in modern science, arguments are typically probabilistic in nature and involve high-level math. My paper is not an exception, it's the norm. As for the flat earthers' arguments, hey listen, the vast majority of them make no sense at all. They are merely things which the mainstream science supposedly cannot explain, even though it's not at all obvious how the flat earth theory explains those things. The only one of the flat earthers' arguments that makes some degree of sense is the argument that if the sun were 150 million kilometers away, the sun rays would appear to be parallel. And that's easy to refute. Sun rays appear to converge for the same reason the rails on the railroad appear to converge, even though they are parallel. Now, some flat earthers, including me a few years ago, think that's not a valid refutation because sun rays appearing to converge happens even when the sun is high in the sky, when the sun rays are nearly vertical, and not only during the sunrise and sunset. But here's the thing, you cannot tell from a photograph whether some long lines are parallel or not. That's not how cameras work. Look up Petzold field curvature. The image that the lens of the camera produces is always curved, and the sensor of the camera is flat, leading to distortions. Long parallel lines don't look parallel on a photograph, even if they are perfectly vertical. And even if you find that argument with converging sun rays compelling, shouldn't you rather be a geocentricist than a flat earther? Doesn't that make more sense? Anyway, that would be all for this video. Thank you for watching.